Hello, everybody. This is Joshua Hatton with One Nation Under Whiskey podcast. I'm joined this year, as I'm joined last year and the years before that. Now our sixth year of the One Nation Under Whiskey podcast. I am joined with the one and only, the nefarious, the wondrous, the concerning, the...
Yeah. Do you think nefarious means honest, humble, and all-around decent guy?
Yeah, well, you are both nefarious and infamous, Jason Johnston Yellen. I think I just complimented you.
You know, nefarious has nothing to do with fairies. It's not the "n" of fairiness.
Oh, I thought it was like new fairies. It's kind of like a Nubian, right?
Like New Morrissey.
Like New Morrissey? Is there new? We need New Morrissey. He's in trouble, Jason, from being a racist.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Yeah, I'm really upset by this. Apparently, maybe not become, but apparently he's come out as being kind of racist, nationalistic, kind of.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. The
Do you
Pope
think you
of
might
Mope.
change your middle name?
I may have to change it to Joshua Johnny Marr Hatton.
Oh.
Right?
I saw
He's
a
the
thing about Johnny
anti-Morrissey.
Marr the other day.
What's that?
Johnny Marr means something in a non-English language. If you just pronounce the word Johnny Marr, it means something in another language.
Really? No, it doesn't. Johnny Marr?
Yeah. Yeah, it was on the 9th episode of the S series of QI for any listeners who are QI fans.
QI.
Yeah, it was on that episode. I won't spoil it. I won't give the answer just in case you see that episode. I don't want to give too much away. I also can't remember. But I'm nefarious, and yet I also keep secrets. Not nefarious secrets. Let's not go down that path.
So listen. We have an absolutely phenomenal season 6 opener with David Ferguson and John Campbell. Did I mention John Campbell of the Lochlea Distillery? I'm very excited to speak with these two. But listen, Jason, I've got a question for you that I wanted to not only kick off the episode with, but kick the season off with. Mm-hmm. And kick 2022 off with, right? I mean, it is early doors for 2022. And so my question for you is, in a way, a question that we pose to all of our guests. What are you looking forward to in season 6 of One Nation Under Whiskey? What has you excited? What potentials has you excited for this season?
I am excited to potentially, and I think at this point it's more than potentially, but we're still sitting here in the early part of the year, but potentially putting microphones in front of people's faces again. I think there's
not even press record. You just put the microphones in front of their faces. What are you going to do now? What are you going to do now, sir? Miss?
2 years I've been putting microphones in front of the faces of my kids, and they are getting sick of it. They want me to leave the house. Mm-hmm. Go outside, Dad. Even if you just go to the supermarket, put that microphone in someone else's face. So that's...
Sir, I'm just trying to ring you out. Get that. Sorry, continue, please.
Yeah. Would you like stamps with that? Oh, no, could you do that again, this time into the microphone, please?
And with a bit more feeling. You sounded like you were reading.
Yeah. Getting a lot of feedback on your recording here. So the in-person, I think, will be really big. One of the things we are working on with our dear Jess is Jess getting out into the field and putting some interviews and recordings together. And I think that could be really wonderful. And part of it for me is we've spent, as you say, 5 full seasons being the interviewers of record. And one of the things you and I have said on previous episodes is when one or the other of us is either asking a question or heading out and having a chitty-chatty, we invariably ask something the other one isn't thinking of.
Correct.
But in 5 years of interviews, we kind of know one another's patterns. And I've certainly said to you, there are times when I've conducted a solo interview where I've thought, what would Joshua ask in this moment?
Yeah.
What would he want to know from this person? So getting a chance to hear Jess ask questions, I'm really curious to learn more about her perspective.
Yeah.
The way she thinks about the larger whiskey world and how she draws that out of an interview. So I think that's going to be really fascinating. I'm excited for those moments. And then continuing to speak to a diverse array of individuals. I know that we, within our industry, we lean heavily towards white men. That's the bulk. And if you go out to talk to a whiskey legend, 9 times out of 10, you're going to get a white guy who's been in the industry for decades upon decades upon decades. But we also keep our eyes peeled at all times for other potential interviews. And one that I'm very excited for in the early stages of season 6 is someone who Michael Nolan said to us, hey, when are you going to interview this person? And we said, well, that person hasn't really had a lot of interest in being interviewed for the podcast. But we're getting closer to getting something on wax with her.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to give the name. I'm going to leave this as a light tease for season 6. But I'm very excited to talk to that person because they're responsible for a part of the process that I feel like I know nothing about and have no skill set for or towards.
Yeah. Agreed with that. Yeah, good.
I'm obviously talking about cask selection. I cannot believe you did not pick that low-hanging fruit.
Here's the reason why, Jason. Because as you know, I only half listened to what you say, and I was busy thinking of what I'm looking forward to.
I can't believe you went as high as 50%. I'm amazed you went as high. If you'd said 25%, I would have been like, yeah, that's a ballpark number. And so,
well,
now that you've set,
I did it for proof. I doubled it.
Now that you've set the witness, and Joshua, the same question to you.
Yes, similar. We have trips. We've got trips planned. We're even planning trips overseas, which has me excited. I was very lucky. We were both very lucky that we got to go to Scotland in early 2020. So at least we can say we went out of the country in the worst year in modern history, globally speaking. But then 2021 had 0 out of the country. This is the first time in 11, almost 12 years I've not traveled to Scotland, and it's been like a knife wound. Like it just, I feel slightly empty for not having been there. It really is such a part of my existence of when's that next trip coming. It really is. It's like going home again and visiting some of these distilleries, getting to see, we know every time we go to Scotland, we're going to see Ian Allen, right? We're going to go up to Elgin. We're going to go down to Campbelltown and visit Mark and Kate Watt, right? And if we can get to Thornhill, visit with Dawn and David Stirk, and I'd love to see Kirsty McCallum again. I want to visit Stephanie McLeod, who's invited us in her blending room. There's so many people that I want to visit with and want to talk with, and it's only going to happen when we get out to Scotland. So I'm excited for that. You and I had an interview just a day ago, I think, when we had some bourbon producers on. I'm not going to release the name now, but we had some bourbon producers on, and through the course...
Bourbon and rye.
There you go. Bourbon and rye. And through the course of the conversation, and we preempted the conversation with this, that we come to a whiskey talk, whiskey production talk from the place of Scotch whiskey production. So when we talk bourbon, when we talk rye, it's always from that perspective. But because we're living that life day in, day out, finishing the conversation with these two gentlemen only proved to me that I have a lot to learn when it comes to bourbon production. And I think back to our conversation with Steve Maggery of Beanley Distillery. There's so much that I need to learn about rum production. And so for me personally, I want to use this year to not just interview people so we can say, hey, we've spoken with this guy, we spoke with this woman, we spoke with these people.
No, that's not our style.
It's not our style, but I just want to make sure that I'm not pulling a Joshua when he's talking to Jason, and I'm using more than 25% of my paying attention abilities and really try to absorb some of these production methods that I should have down in my head more. And I know I brought this up to you the other day, and you're like, I think you're okay. It's okay. And no, I really feel like I'm lacking. So I want to use this year to improve my own education of spirits production beyond malt whiskey. There you go. Those are my goals, Jason. That's what I'm looking forward to.
Speaking of malt whiskey.
All right.
Is during our intro.
Yes.
We've been having a little sip on a bottle that you obviously knew was coming into the country, and I didn't, but you said to me, you have to get one of these.
Have to.
And then you assisted me, and I thank you for that. And Michael Nolan mentioned earlier, he assisted also. Thank you, Michael. But this is a 100% Islay Kilchoman PX Sherry single cask, bottled by our very dear friend Gene.
Bottled
at
for
Warehouse Liquors.
We've been fighting this for decades, Jason. You just said bottled by. We're the bottled for. We're the bottled by. He's the bottled. Anyway, yeah.
So here's the hashtag real talk. I already finished my first dram of this during the first 15 minutes of recording.
That's why you're having problems with the words. There you go.
But date filled is the 27th of May 2015, and the date bottled is the 27th of May 2021. So a full 6 years in cask there. And you said to me, you're going to like the way you drink this. And it's dangerous. It's
dangerous, isn't it? Right. I think the PX maturation obviously brings the sweetness through, but somehow the lighter peating element of the 100% Islay, right? Because regular Kilchoman is 50 ppm, 50 phenolic parts per million on the barley. Mm-hmm. And this is about 20 to 25. I think they really run the numbers. They used to say 15 to 20, then they say 20 to 25. So it's in that range. But that PX sherry sweetness seems to somehow highlight the peaty element of this. So it seems to be a touch more peated, at least to my palate, than regular 100% Islay bottlings.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because it puts me in mind of Bill Thomas at Jack Rose picked a couple of Kilchomans that were the lower peating Kilchomans. Mm. And one was bourbon and one was sherry. And they were both absolutely cracking. When I bought them from him and I got them home and popped the corks, I texted him and said, these are two of the best Kilchomans I've had. These are remarkable. And I didn't expect to like a lightly peated Kilchoman as much as I did. And I think everything you've just said, which I listened to carefully, diligently, and 100%, was the lower ppm and the sweetness of the PX really heightens the experience.
Really does. Yep.
Yeah, you picked this one, man. That was and by that I mean you picked this for me. You absolutely nailed it. Absolutely nailed it. 57.4% alcohol. Anybody in the US, I don't even know if this is still in stock at Warehouse Liquors.
It is. Yeah, no, it
Okay.
is. He still has a few
Okay.
left, but it's Warehouse Liquors, and whether it's the bourbon that they select or the Scotch whiskey that they select, it moves pretty quickly. So, I'm not going to lie. This is one of the more remarkable Kilhomans I've had. And I told our listeners, either in 2021 or in 2020, the Madeira cask finish single cask for Warehouse is the best Kilhoman single cask I've ever had for my palate. I just think it ticks every single box I could ever want. So
It's exemplary, there's no doubt.
Yeah. And this is up to that standard. It's so great. Listen,
I'm going to give the listeners a peek behind the curtain.
all right.
And then I'm going to deliver a pro level transition.
There's something I need to say before you deliver the pro level transition. Can I say it?
Should I? Maybe you should, and then I'll give the peek behind the curtain and then go into my pro level moment.
So I failed big time when I mentioned
Checks out with you, 100%. Two
failed-
thumbs way up.
Yeah, way up your arse. I failed big time when I was listing off the names of people that I was so excited to see when we got to Scotland. And the two people that I'm so desperate to see more than anyone else is our beloved Jess and our beloved Swede Scott. And when we get to Glasgow, I'm going to hug the ever-living shit out of them, and I'm not going to let go, and I won't let them let go. Jason, we haven't hugged them. We haven't shared a physical dram with them in 2 years.
What I love about your list making, and you do it all the time.
I know it's a failing.
Is your lists are always incomplete. Always. And I don't know why you return to list making.
This is how
because
I
they
do it.
always set you up for failure.
Always.
And now here you are groveling to Sweet Scott and Jess.
I'm not groveling to them. I'm correcting my errors, Jason.
groveling. If they could see you on the ground right now, falling at their virtual feet. Can't believe you made a list. Can't believe you made a list. Peek behind the curtain.
All right.
You and I, as we started the recording, had said, okay, what are we going to pour? And we had just had some of our Catoctin Creek single cask finished in a Kilhoman PX
cask,
sherry
yeah.
hoggy. And you had said, why don't we do the Warehouse Liquors PX Kilhoman? And it made so much sense that without giving you any pushback at all, which I think you will attest is very unlike me.
It's
I
what
went
you do.
straight to my
This
shelf.
is how you do it.
I went straight to my shelf and I poured it.
Yeah.
So that's how this exact Kilhoman came to be in the glass. Now with Kilhoman in the air, there is a gentleman who was instrumental in getting Kilhoman off the ground. We've obviously talked many times about Anthony Wills, obviously talked about Dr. Jim Swan. Malcolm Rennie was a man at the distillery. Say that a little louder for those in the back.
Fucking pro level. Oh my
Thank
gosh.
you very much.
Oh my gosh.
Thank you very much.
You do you.
Malcolm-
Continue doing you.
Malcolm Rennie then left Kilhoman, went off to Annandale, south of Scotland. Remarkable distillery, well worth getting to, well worth visiting.
Gorgeous.
Lovely, lovely spirit running in those stills.
Yep.
And actually spent time visiting with Malcolm Rennie at Annandale. Had a great little chat with him. He then moved on and made his way to Lochlea Distillery in my home county of Ayrshire. And Malcolm Rennie just left Lochlea to go to Rosebank, leaving an opening that was resoundingly filled by one John Campbell from Laphroaig, the co-focus of today's episode, the premiere episode of season 6.
See, this is why they pay you the big bucks, Jason.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
So David Ferguson, John Campbell, thank you both so much for joining us. Lochlea Distillery is one that, I recently found out about. I want to say Jason and I, well, I don't know about Jason, but I found out about Lochlea sometime early last year, a bit late to the game, if I'm being honest. And it was only after doing some research on the Falkirk distillery. And I said, well, who else is building in the lowlands, right? And then lo and behold, a few months later, I received a sample, or 2 samples, from Sam Filmus of Impex Beverages. I said, Lochlea on it. And then he sends me an email. I said, I hope you received the Lochlea samples. Give them a taste, give them a go. Let me know what you think. And I tasted them, and they were just, I don't think they were, well, the whiskey wasn't 3 years yet, but it was just lovely for 2.5-year-old spirit, and you could see the direction it was going in. To which I said, these guys have something that's kind of cool. And then, of course, Sam says, well, we're in discussions with these guys. And I said, oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. And then come September time, we had our national sales meeting, September 2021. And there was this rumor that someone with the last name that started with a C may be joining the distillery. I said, oof, that's interesting as well. What's happening here? And lo and behold, here we are now with you, David, and with you, John, to discuss Lochlea Distillery. And so, gents, if you wouldn't mind, and maybe I'll hand it off to you first, David, if you wouldn't mind, give us a little bit of the history of Lochlea, where the idea started, the idea for a lowland distillery. I'd really like to hear it because I think there's a lot of people that, like me, are late to the game in understanding who Lochlea is and what you guys are aiming to do.
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, thank you very much for having us on. Appreciate it. The idea or the planning for this all started way before John and I were involved. So I think 2014, the owner who owns the farm had this idea that he could build a distillery, and from then until literally earlier this week, we didn't have any whiskey to sell yet. So it's been from his perspective, been a long journey. But yeah, we're independent, family owned. We do everything, vast majority of things on site. We grow our own barley, which is pretty unusual in the industry to have control even at that stage. The guys talk about five stages of making whiskey. They never talk about growing the barley. That never comes in before on the tour. So we've got traceability with everything, just naturally because we're a working farm. So that you're right in what you say. No one really knew about us, about Lochlea until last year.
Yeah.
And partly, to be honest, by choice. Neil had some guys in production. He is actually quite a shy guy. When you meet him, he's not. You wouldn't expect. Some people in the whiskey industry are quite loud, and we're not like that as a business, and he's not like that personality wise. So I think it was just kind of low key, get on with producing the best spirit that we can, and when the time's right, we'll tell people, look, we've got whiskey coming. So when I joined the business just over a year ago, that was my kind of remit, was let's let people know that we have whiskey coming soon. Which is why I was then speaking to your colleague, Sam, and people to make sure that once we had that first bottling ready, that it had a place to go.
Brilliant. Yeah, I saw, when Sam sent me the samples, I then checked out the website, dug a little deeper, and I saw that Malcolm Rennie was on there for a while. Is he still on the team? It was an interesting name popping up because I think he was with Kilhoman when they first started very early on. And of course, that's a distillery in the Impex portfolio. Is he still connected?
No, so Malcolm was involved in setting the place up. He's moved to Rosebank to help them restart things. So we, John, were lucky enough to get John on board at the end of last year. So now we have a team John has a team in production. I've got a team on the commercial side, and we're in fact, we've got another new person joining next week. So we're growing exponentially for the size that we are. But even when I joined, it was literally three guys making stuff and nothing else. We're now up to a team of 9-10. So John's very much in charge of everything, quality of spirit and everything else.
So when you say this, the size that we are, what is that? What is your capacity looking like right now?
John, you want to answer that? You'll have a view on what it is now and what it could be.
Yeah, no, it's still a small capacity right now. The potential is there to grow, and it will grow over time. And I guess we're taking slow steps. It just wants to be. I guess the main thing for Lochlea is it's the right steps and positive steps, and so that's the main thing we want. We want to do everything kind of in the right manner. I think that's very important to all of us who work at the site, that everything's done in the right manner, and it's within our kind of, I guess, remit and control, and kind of we just put the best that we can out there and always put our best foot forward.
So in talking about that, John, we're sitting here, we're recording January 27th. You put out your inaugural release on what we know as Burns Night, but it was obviously Burns Day when you were putting it out there. You've got the connection to Burns on the farm where Burns formerly farmed.
Yeah.
But rather than talking about Burns right now, which I'm always up for, I want to talk about that spirit that as you came into this project, you're clearly examining spirit that you didn't distill. And so when you come to that, what were you first struck by with the spirit? And then what was in your mind as you were thinking about an inaugural release?
A good question. I guess there's some of these steps that had already kind of taken place. They had worked, I think, during the summer. It was sort of maybe April, May time, maybe late spring, to start working on the inaugural liquid. And to be honest, didn't do a huge amount to it. We kind of tweaked it a wee bit at the end, but nothing really. We just kind of went with it was good liquid, so no need to tweak too much. So I'm not here to get in the road of good whiskey. So not a lot, and I guess but moving forward, I guess one of the things I really wanted to do straight away, it helps kind of all of us, me included, to get feet under the table, is to understand what Lochlea meant to everyone. So that's the thing, because that, to me, that's the job, to create that spirit under the kind of the guidance of the people who are kind of cradling that brand and making the whiskey. So that's all I'm kind of doing, is trying to kind of recreate what the people see as or the workforce see as Lochlea to them.
So how would you describe the spirit? For someone like myself who hasn't tasted it at all, Joshua's lucky, he has. People on January 25th started tasting it. How would you describe it?
Yeah, it should be full of flavour, bursting with fruit straight away. Lots of kind of fruity flavours coming through, some nice grassy notes, quite a lot of high floral aromatics are going to be coming through as well. And trying to, I guess the job is to build a depth, kind of moving on. And we're looking at trying to do a couple of different things on that just now. But like again, if it's not broke, you don't fix it. So like it's kind of, I guess, just trying to. It should be approachable but full of depth. I guess if you're wanting a 10-second sell, it's going to be really approachable, but just it's going to be full and bursting with flavour. A lot of different types of fruits and kind of grassy notes and floral coming through.
If I can ask one more follow-up, and then I will return the floor to you, Joshua. Sure. But one of the things that, and I think I remember this correctly with you, David, where this came up in the Impex deep dive, or this was the Drinks With this series that Joshua just concluded with Impex. There's this idea of a lowland distillery. And over the last, 10, 15 years, maybe 20, the market has wandered away from lowland distilleries, and the region itself drastically shrunk with the number of working distilleries. And I hope I remember this correctly, David, but when you were on talking with Joshua, there was this question about, would you take ownership of being in the lowland region? And I think your response was, well, we're not really here to represent a region. We're here to put out the very best whiskey we can. Is that a fair remembering of what you may have said at 2:00 in the morning, your time?
That is correct. I then felt bad a little bit because obviously within Impex, I think we will be the lowland single malt. So I didn't want to go too far the other way. But no, it's interesting. Previous company I worked for had kind of regional malt whiskies where very much the emphasis was on this is the profile that you might expect from a Speyside whiskey, from a Highland, and I get that as a marketing tool. And it made sense when the regions were created a while ago. But for us as a distillery, the fact that we're in the lowlands is kind of inconsequential. It's not. I think nowadays with the type of spirit you can produce wherever you are, I wouldn't see us as trying to particularly fly the flag for lowland whiskies. I mean, the good thing, if people do still associate us with that region, for me, is that there are some other very good lowland whiskies coming out, so that hopefully that brings the whole thing up. But I think if you taste Lochlea, you won't necessarily go, "Oh, that must be a lowland." That's not what I get from our spirit at all.
Yeah, it really feels like the lowland region is exploding right now, with the number of distilleries that are now opening within that region, and it will be interesting. I might have had this conversation with Nick Ravenhall over at Holyrood, but it's that question of what can the lowland region become, where if it has been slowly forgotten or ignored by a consumer, how can that come roaring back again and tell some fresh stories in that region? So I quite liked your answer, which is why it's stuck in my brain all these weeks later, because it did have that sense of echoing what John's saying here, which is it's spirit first and region second. So I'm excited to see what that does, and I will relinquish my time to my fellow gentlemen, but I will have further questions momentarily.
Well, I like what's being said here, where you're not leading with lowlands. You're leading with flavor. And then I think of distilleries like Annandale who are doing, some peated malt, right? And it seems everybody's understanding is Speyside is rich and sweet, Highland is austere, Isla is smoky, Campbelltown is funky coastal, so is Skye, and lowland has always been the tame little granny of whiskeys, and it seems as if you're Are you purposely trying to change that, or again back to the original point of we're not here to dictate what is and what is not Lowlands. We're creating the whiskey that we think is very good.
When you're creating a liquid, you have to start off with a vision. So like, the vision is the vision. And I think like Neil had a very clear vision of the liquid he wants to create. The people at Lochlea have a very clear vision of the liquid that we want to create, and it's quite unanimous the type of liquid that's running through kind of everyone, the type of liquid we're trying to create and be. I think the other side of that is, yes, we are in the Lowlands, and there's no reason, I think we should be proud of that too. So like it's kind of like it's kind of like me. I'm lots of different layers. I'm from Islay, yes, but then I'm Scottish, yep, and then I'm British, yep, and then I'm just a world citizen. So I feel lots of things at different times. So I think the most important one for me to be is a good version of John Campbell, and I think this is kind of, it's a wee bit twee, but like Lochlea needs to be Lochlea, and like the vision that the owners created for it, and that's our job to try and tell people what that is and how it's going to be, and kind of what we're trying to create here, and just some of the other kind of the great stories kind of coming out the site as well. And once people understand it and kind of start to get a feel for what we're doing, I think it'll excite a lot of people.
I remember years back, it was many years back now, having a conversation with John McClellan at Kilchoman, and it was a couple years after he had joined the distillery. And I said to him, or I asked him, what is it like coming from Bunnahabhain and going to Kilchoman? And he said, it was actually a lot easier than you think, because Kilchoman is exactly 1/10 the size of Bunnahabhain. So I just needed to adjust everything based on their production and what I had known the Bunnahabhain production to be. And so, John, from your perspective, what's it like coming from Laphroaig, joining Lochlea? How are you working in Lochlea differently than you did with Laphroaig, and how does your time with Laphroaig inform your work with Lochlea?
So again, a good question. I guess, how do I work with, I guess, coming from peated, I guess, to plain spirits? It's just, I think I'm old enough now. I guess I've got good experience. I know I've gained lots of kind of technical knowledge through the years. So I guess it's just a case of using my experience to understand, I guess, like, keep going back to that point. But like, once I know what people are trying to create, I know what that means technically, what we have to do, and kind of what we have to kind of adjust or tweak more than anything. It's not like there's not, I guess, huge adjustments needed to say something that's already good. So it's just tweaking to try and add just that depth into the liquid as well. And then I guess second part was about kind of Laphroaig. What was that again, Josh?
Yeah, just how your time at Laphroaig may have informed what you do at Lochlea.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a different scale as well, completely different scale. It's very, I guess, at Laphroaig, the recipe was set. The job really was to not muck up. And just, you would kind of tweaking around the edges. Like nobody changes Laphroaig. Nobody's that daft. It's the world's biggest peated single malt, so like, yeah, don't muck up, John. Whereas with Lochlea, it's like it's a different kind of thing. Your job's to cradle and to kind of nurture and to push and to just try and nudge it forward and make it kind of, I guess, what we want it to be. And so it's a completely different thing. And I guess making there was lots of layers to Lafroig as well. So yes, it had to be peaty, and that was the biggest thing not to muck up on. But like there was lots of layers below that you always had to concentrate on too. So it's going to be the same with Lochlea. Once we've got like we'll just be kind of working on the layers and the depth of the character, and just it's tweaking kind of what we do in the production process to just give us that depth.
You said something really interesting a second ago there, John, which is when someone gives you the story of what they're looking for, in your brain, you can do the technical side of that. As someone who wanders through distilleries looking at all the piping work and just trying to be like, okay, that's connected to that, but it goes through that room via that wall and how that goes over there. Are you able to articulate how you go from story to the technical process? Because that boggles my mind.
Okay, yep, and I'll try and kind of keep it like lingo proof. So, like basically the first part, well, is the malted barley. Like, what are you dealing with? Where's it coming from? Like, what are the contributing factors? So, for Lochlea, it's grown within 2 miles of the mash tun. So, like, it's all very local. For a lot of other distilleries, it could be coming from south of England, north of Scotland. It could be peated, it could be unpeated. So there's lots of, again, if you think about that, like where it's grown, the kind of, I guess, the terroir, and then what you do with it, whether it's plain or peated, you can start to see a few variables kicking in there straight away. The next part is the extraction of the sugars and flavours in the mash tun, and how you do that, whether it's like the wort, which is the sugary liquid and flavour you take off the mash tun, whether it's clear or cloudy, that'll now start to bring in different variables as well. You then move into the fermentation and the type of your vessels, the kind of temperature, the yeast types, they all bring in variables as well. So that you're just building on the variables and the variables. And then distillation, wash distillation, speed is kind of the thing here, and the rate of distillation and how you want to, what flavours you're going to get by going faster or slower. So that brings in more variables. And then cuts in the second distillation. So heads or foreshot cuts, then spirit cuts, like the depths and lengths and kind of flavours, and then what that leaves for your tails or your faints, depending on where you are in Scotland, and then what that does to the balance in the vessels. So then that's you kind of in the distillery. Then you've got the casks onto that as well. So you can see, like, just by moving up different bits and pieces all the way through that process, that you can end up with a very different liquid from even the same malted barley at the beginning. Or so you can just even change one thing and it changes everything thereafter. Yeah.
It strikes me that, do you have controls in place? So if you move that one thing, you know you can then see what's being changed. But if you move that thing and that thing over there, it starts to get a little uneven ground. And if you change this and this and this, you have to be in trouble at that point.
Yeah, no, you can only change one thing at a time. That's the thing. Just one thing at a time, because that's the thing. Because then you don't know what's made. Like you will know what's made the difference depending on, I guess, the outcomes. So, like, if you change your rate of distillation, if you go faster, you're going to bring more kind of heavier kind of oils and grassy notes in. Whereas if you go slower, it's going to get more kind of copper contact. That gives you kind of instant fruit and long-term fruit as well, because you get these sulfites that will turn into real kind of like tropical fruit flavours in your maturation. So, like, that's just wash distillation. So, like, something just as simple as that, you can change kind of quite a lot as well. So it's experience, and technical training and experience, I guess. And made lots of mistakes. So same as everyone else. If you're going to try and try and understand something, you've got to make mistakes. You've got to break eggs. So I've been doing it for well, it's almost 30 years now, so yeah, got that. Just broken a lot of eggs, I guess.
But it also strikes me that we're in an industry that deals in the long game, and so as you're making or as you're running experiments now, and you're able to see payoff as it comes out the mash tun. And I liked what you said about the cloudy and the clear, or as you're running a faster distillation and what that means for oils and flavors, you're getting information now immediately. But then you've also got the cask component of that, and then you've got what you're seeing for that exact liquid at 3 years versus 12 years versus 30 years. And it is interesting. I was thinking as you were speaking that experience goes such a long way here when you know what this moment coming out the still right now will look like, or hopefully will look like, in 15 or 25 or 40 years, say. Do you ever get impatient? You don't seem like an impatient man, but do you get impatient within a moment where you wish you could fast forward into the distant future?
No, not really. Sorry, I just
got easy answer.
That's my dry Scottish sense of humour coming out there. But no, and that is the thing, Jason. It is the thing. We are now planning for whiskey that I'll be retired. Well, maybe never retired. Who knows? But we're planning 25-year-olds, so that is now 2047. So we're planning for stuff like that now. So yeah, you're always planning. You've always got to take a long-term approach, and equally, we know the type of casks, what we want the liquid to look like for these brands as well. So it's a whole thing, and at each stage you think the liquid will be about here, and so you try and match the cask to that part of the process. So that's we've done that. And we've kind of got that programme in place now as well.
I think that just for adding on to what John said in that point, that's been one of the biggest things since John joined us was talking much longer term. So we had plans as a business, but I think the long term stock, the maturation strategy, that was I think a fairly substantial piece of work that John did in his first couple of weeks with us. So for me, that's exciting because I can, first of all, I know what casks not to touch right now, but also we know the cask profile, the makeup of Lochlea 25-year-old, which is obviously going to be phenomenal. But we're at such an early stage that what we're making right now, and actually the response to the first one's been quite overwhelming. If people like it now, this is only ever going to get better. So it makes my job a lot easier when we can look further ahead to what's coming.
I'm going to use Kilchoman as the example again. I like where this discussion is going, where you're preparing now for a 25-year-old. And it seems you have an understanding of where that 25-year-old is going to go. But if I think back to Kilchoman and early on and tasting their 3-year-old stock, their 4, their 5-year-old stock, it was fruity, it was floral. And then right around 9 years of age, 10 years of age, it starts to get a bit herbaceous and flinty and almost, at least to my palate, starting to get into some of the flavor profile that I get from Port Ellens, from younger Port Ellens, not necessarily the older Port Ellens. I just see some similarities there, and I'm curious. There's going to be a lot of layers to this question. Your job, John, at Laphroaig was don't muck it up. You have a system in place. You're there to make Laphroaig 10-year-old and quarter cask and so on, and just don't muck that up. But here you are with Lochlea, and David, John, your entire team is concerned on making whiskey for now, but also for 25 years from now. Are you still in the mode of don't muck it up, or are you in the mode of there may be some tweaking here and there to get that 25-year-old to be where it needs to be 22 years from now? Does that question make sense? Like, are you still experimenting a bit? What is that looking like?
So yeah, absolutely, and that's a really good question as well, Josh. So it is absolutely, because we don't know what a 10-year-old Lochlea is like yet. So there's quite a lot of projection there. So the job is to keep a close eye on it, to see how it's developing and understand what shows, like, the character of the distillery. I think is really important. You taste that in a whiskey as well. So like, you need to understand, like, if you're tasting the inaugural Lochlea to a 10-year-old to a 25-year-old, that you can see the thread between them all, and that they do have the same DNA. That's hugely, hugely important. And so we know what the DNA we want it to look like and want it to feel like, but we still have to make sure it ends up there. So we are kind of watching, and it's like, I don't know, it's just like raising a child, I guess. You know what you want them to, roughly. You do know there's fundamentals you want them to have, and that's your job as a parent, to get the fundamentals in there. You can't kind of, and let them choose, I guess, the life they lead, as long as, I guess, like with a child, if they're a good person and they're happy, I guess, as a parent, that you've kind of got a couple of fundamentals right there for them. So let them explore the world and kind of make the most of that. So again, like Lochlea, you've got to just give it the fundamentals and kind of let it develop into the character it becomes as well. So, but we kind of know how we want it to end up as well. So yeah, no, you're watching brief all the way through.
As the parent of 2 teenage girls, I can understand how difficult such a task might be. So,
do you ever want to kill your whiskey? Throttle a barrel's neck? Is that how that works?
No. Just I know that feeling too, with 4 boys. So at all different ages. So, but yeah. It passes, Josh, I guess. That's all I say. It passes. They come close again. They come back.
God, I sure hope so. It is difficult. You know what? Just like with whiskey aging, I guess,
knocks off the edges.
Child evolution is not linear. Right? There you go.
It knocks off the edges, just like a good cask. Yeah. You're the barrel. Be the barrel, Josh.
Oh my gosh, I feel like knackered wood right now.
Yeah.
That needs to be on a t-shirt. Be the barrel. That is fantastic. David, I had a follow-up for you here, where obviously we know John's background. We know where John has come from to join the Lochlea project. You mentioned earlier when we were talking about previous employment, looking at how malts were shaped. Can you, for my benefit first and foremost, but also for the listeners, can you give us a bit about yourself, and then really the same question that was asked of John? What do you find bringing from previous employment to what you're now doing at Lochlea?
Yeah, of course. So I actually, my previous role was with the same company as John, so came here from Beam Suntory. Great company in a lot of ways. So I actually found out about Lochlea because they were a customer of mine in terms of selling casks, selling Maker's Mark barrels to the team. So yeah, I'm very quick about my own background was with Beam on the cask side for a couple of years, doing spent a lot of time in Kentucky and Jerez and all the areas that Beam were using their for their own Scotch malt distilleries and tequila and the other various other spirits, and then essentially working with the master blenders or the distillery managers from distilleries to work out their wood program, what they need, what kind of flavour profile they want to go for, and matching that up to what casks we need to provide. So that was almost a kind of behind the scenes role as such. But through that, doing the IBD and doing all these various things that a lot of people in our industry do to get the as much technical knowledge as they can, never never going to be anything like the team that John has on site actually doing this stuff. But I think that helped. I mean, it certainly helped me understand the full process end to end. Because prior to that, I worked for an independent bottler, like yourselves. So that's kind of where I started off, Douglas Lang. And that was very much front end, hosting hundreds of tastings, all the events under the sun, and built up a lot of good relationships with customers here, but also with various export markets. So I've taken bits from that role, certainly, to get us established here. And then when this opportunity came up with Lochlea, being able to get in at the start, and I'm sure, I don't want to speak for John, but I'm sure as part of his thinking, being able to shape something that is still, even now that we have a product in market, it's at the very early stage. So it's really exciting, and as the team grows as well, we bring people in, they get excited about the project, and we're always looking for fresh perspective and things. We don't ever want to become insular and only seeing our own brand. We want to make sure we know what's going on out there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've kind of come from a couple of different types of background within the industry, and then this is all new as well. Just starting a brand from the beginning, but it's going okay so far.
So you seem to be the very man to ask this question of then. So just like we got to a point where regions and regionality became a shortcut, but it was a nice way to introduce the consumer to the world of Scotch. I'm starting to notice more and more there's a little bit more pushback about 70% of the flavour of a whiskey comes from the cask, right? Has that fallen victim to the same shortcut as regionality and regions? Or are we really just saying, look, a lot of flavour comes from a cask, right? Yeah. Is it 70%? We could argue that till the cows come home. But has it become too easy? Has it become a bit of a crutch for us to lean on this 70% number?
That's a good question. I mean, I've heard the 70%. I've heard the 50. I've heard I think no one that I've seen anyway. No one has ever said the number and then backed it up with any kind of scientific paper that showed. So I think. I mean, certainly it obviously has a huge influence. There's absolutely no doubt about that. But to me, everything that John mentioned there about the process that the spirit goes through before it gets there, there are so many variables that change flavour and quality that John and his team are obviously looking at for us. And you put a spirit from one distillery into two identical casks, or as identical as you can get, they'll be different. So it's not, to me, it's actually more about how your spirit interacts with different type of casks, rather than just saying, okay, once it goes in the cask, it's a lottery. We'll wait and see. I think the way we've tried to do it at Lochlea certainly is going direct to source is a big thing. I don't. As soon as they're tipped in makers, they're straight over here. They don't sit in a cooperage or go drying out, anything like that. Likewise with the rest, we have one sole supplier. That's where we get our really high quality sherry casks. So there are ways that you can ensure the casks themselves are good, are nice and wet and ready to interact with your spirit. But I don't. The whole percentage thing is tricky. I'd probably say, I mean, if I was to say a percent, I'd probably say 50-50, because you have a lot of things you can do before it gets there. But yeah, it's difficult. I've heard higher numbers than 70, but it was from people who sell casks for a living. So you have to take these things with a pinch of salt.
I love the fact that you were hesitant to attach a number, then you did, and now we're going to quote you for the rest of your days. Well, yeah. David Ferguson's a 50-50 man.
Even since I said that, I'm thinking, no, that's not quite right. Yeah, it's impossible to tell. There's a lot of magic in there as well.
Right, and I think there's that aspect of what's the use of the cask, right? Is it fresh? Is it going in a second? Is it Joshua mentioned knackered wood a moment ago. Like knackered wood sure is brilliant Ayrshire expression, sure as shite, right? Knackered wood sure as shite isn't giving 70% of itself to that liquid. There's a reason young grain is put in knackered wood to just sit in a corner and behave itself. So
yeah, it's a great point. Even within, so John pulled a bunch of single cask samples for us the other day. We're talking about already planning for our next release in about a couple of months' time. Beautiful. And we had sort of 30 different casks. So same wood type from the same supplier, same spirit that went into them. One was in the top of our racking, one was down low, and they're different. You got, I'm preaching to the converted here because you guys sell single cask whiskey, but so I think
we've heard of it.
Yeah, I mean it's just there's so much variety even within the same warehouse. That's where. That's obviously where John's role comes in with putting together the right recipes for it.
How high is that racking that you're talking of?
John, correct me if I'm wrong. Is it 6, 7? Yeah. Oh, I mean, we actually
casks, not feet or meters. Maybe it's meters.
Casks. Yeah, we're just in the process of building our second warehouse. So we've got some dunnage, we've got some racking in the first one, but the second warehouse is the structure. In fact, to send you guys a picture, I took a picture this morning when the sun was out. It's the structure is up for the second one, so we've outgrown warehouse 1 already.
It happens quickly, right?
I've got another question that goes in line with Jason's one about casks. And David, I love what you said because we agree with you, right? Each cask is unique. Each cask is different, even if you're dealing with 2 Maker's Mark bourbon barrels filled on the same day, one after the other, and they could be sitting next to each other, and they're both going to taste different. In your experience, David and John, do you know if those variabilities increase if one were, say, a Maker's Mark and one were an MGP, or is a bourbon cask a bourbon cask so long as it's good wood and received kind of wet?
You want to fire away, John? I've got an opinion, but it might be different to yours. I don't know.
It can make a difference, yep. And I guess the difference with Makers, the main difference with Makers, is the thickness of the heads. They use their heads are 1/4 inch thicker, so they're air dried longer than other barrels too. So hopefully Makers is going to take quite a lot out of the barrel as well. I know that's kind of why we use Makers at Laphroaig as well, just because with the heads being just that 1/4 inch thicker, you just got a different flavour profile as well, and equally it kept more liquid in the barrel as well. So, so simple things like that, the cooperage it constructs it, the way they do things, the amount of again that can lead to, I guess, more vaporization and different oxidization, so that gives you different chemical reactions. And again, that's kind of why you can have 2 casks sitting next to each other can be different, because they're just slightly different, make up different trees. I think a couple of bourbon plants have actually showed even at this level of the tree and this level of the tree, different
Buffalo
levels.
Trace did that, the Oak Project, sure.
So, even at different heights of the tree, you get different variation in the maturation. So, I think when it'll be a combination of just how many of the tops of the tree, the middle of the tree, the bottom of the tree that you've got making that shook, and then how it's coopered. Again, so many variables that come in to these 2 casks sitting beside each other, made it on the same day, probably by the same cooper even, can still be different as well, produce different whiskey.
Yeah, sure. With Lochlea as well, when we, I'm saying we as if I was there at the time, but even before I joined, the guys had, they didn't just go straight for Makers and this is what we're using, that's it. they experimented with some different types of bourbon barrels. So we do have some other, if there's Woodford there are, I think, a couple of Buffalo Trace. So it was a conscious decision to go with the makers. You've got another thing that John made a great point there about even down to the cooper that's made the cask over in Kentucky. There's so many things that how long the bourbon was in there for. Some if you're going to fill a Booker's barrel that's had 9-year whiskey in there, it's going to have a different impact than something that's only been filled for 4 years. The other thing about makers for us, it's got a much higher wheat content, so it's a different style of bourbon than a Jim Beam, which is more rye, more spice. Again, I don't know how many variables we've mentioned in the process, even on this call, but all of these things obviously go into, which probably makes John's job more difficult. But we're still at such an early stage that we're still learning how our spirit works with different cask types and doing experiments here and there to find out what. Certainly to me, our and I'm sure the four of us in here, but the fresh first fill bourbon with our spirit style is just incredible. It might be a wee bit lighter in colour, and that might, some people are still look at that as some kind of measure of quality, but for flavour, it's just amazing.
Brilliant. I had a line of questioning that is going to take us down a slightly different path. So, Jason, if there was something you wanted to throw in here, great. And if not,
mine was a geeky follow-up, and so I don't know if you're going to take us in that type of direction.
You do you, and then I'll do me.
Okay. So earlier on, John, we have a very geeky listenership, and I know you were giving us the process, and you were going through it beautifully and quickly, and so I let you get away with there being a significant difference with a cloudy wash, a cloudy wort, and a clear wort. So I know from my time going around Westland, Matt Hoffman has talked about the exact same thing. But for the benefit of our listeners, could you talk to why one would be cloudy and one would not be cloudy, and then what that does to flavour? And please get as geeky as you want to be.
Cheers. So the thing that makes a wort cloudy or not cloudy is the turbidity of the wort. So you're looking at kind of the main thing that will affect that is raking in the mash tun. So when you are raking inside the mash tun, you're basically forcing it. If you can imagine, the mash is like a big tea bag or a pot of tea. And if you keep stirring that, you're going to push some of the leaves through, and then it gets into your tea. That's basically a cloudy wort. Whereas if you don't rake so much and you just kind of let it filter through, maybe at a slightly slower pace, it'll be just clearer. So so we are trying. We've removed quite a lot of raking to try and get clearer wort at Lochlea, and I guess then we're looking to slow it down slightly, just so that it's got its time to kind of filter through and pull everything out nice and slowly to get that clearer wort coming through. The flavour profile difference would be if you're raking a lot. You're in a plain malt, you're just going to get much more of a kind of cereal characteristic. You're just going to push that kind of grain cereally kind of characteristic through. Whereas if you get clear, you'll get much more kind of fruity characteristic coming through as well. So hence why we're trying to go the kind of clear way, and it just reacts differently in your fermentations as well thereafter with the solid content. So if you kind of remember further back, we want it bursting with fruit, so we're trying to get a wee bit clearer in the wort and just allow that to kick in the fermenters.
Does a more cloudy wort have a harder time fermenting? Do the solids get in the way of fermentation?
No, not so much. They can, I guess, they could, but it's more the what it allows, I guess, the yeast to do. It just gets in the way of the yeast a wee bit and changes the kind of the acidity level within the fermenter. So that changes the kind of acids, and so you just get different kind of flavour compounds coming through due to that.
Excellent. You never just put your hands in there and say, well, the cask will take care of 70% of this, so I'm not going to be too worried today.
It's 50. We've just learned that it's 50, Jason.
Yeah. What's your number, John? If you were to attach a number that you don't want to attach, what number would you say?
I don't know. That's a good question. That's a good question because it's going to be different for different ages of whiskey, I feel, as well. And it's kind of it's I don't know. I'm trying to think of an analogy. Jason, so would you say you're 50% of your relationship, or is it 70-30 sometimes? Is it 90-10? Or how does that work? Because it should be a balance and it should be a kind of a moving feast. But yeah, I guess.
I love the subtext of today's interview, right? We've got parenting advice, we've got marriage advice. Like next it'll be how to load a dishwasher. Yeah. Like this is brilliant. This is.
See, whiskey cures everything.
On that.
Whiskey is the answer to everything. So there you go. Yeah, so just whiskey more. So yeah, but it's just like
brilliant.
Yes, it should be a combination. You should always, for me, we want to try and taste the distillery flavour, the characteristics of the distillery. So like for Lochlea, you want some of that. Like the barley's Ayrshire barley, it's grown within 2 miles of the distillery. We need to taste these flavours. We need to understand what that difference that makes to us, and kind of how we accentuate that within the whiskey, so that you can, if you've got anywhere kind of reasonable amount of kind of understanding of flavour, you should be able to get that, and then say the fruits, and then you're just building that with these fruit flavours that should be bursting out of it, and then you get some of these grassy kind of notes as well, because we're on a farm and you should have kind of slight grassy notes coming through, floral notes add the depth, and then the casks should support all of these things. And it's almost like the cask is like the bitters in a cocktail. It just pulls everything together and it pulls, and the sum of the parts is better than the individual.
That's a great point. Coming back to what David had set up previously as well, which is, I know for Joshua and I with the company, and as David alluded to a moment ago, a first fill bourbon will allow the distillery to be present with some nice framing, some wood presence, some sweetness. For some consumers, ruby red whiskey is the best whiskey, but invariably that much sherry will throw the spirit out of balance. But as far as a consumer taking something off a shelf, it's easy peasy. Do you grapple with that, John, between how much colour the consumer looks for and how much of that distillery character you want to be present in the bottle that's on the shelf?
I guess a bit. You have to. The customer's always right. So it's like there's no point in, I guess, like, but it should still have some DNA. So like, yes, it's, you're absolutely right. It's tougher with a big kind of sherry character to keep Lochlea, but you should still be able to get there as well. And it's kind of like us now. I guess we've got all this knowledge of whiskies, and sometimes we might want, like, so if you go from, I guess, one end of the scale would be a 25-year-old and a first fill sherry just left, and you're at kind of like, whoa, big, kind of powerful Oloroso, or whatever, Pedro Jimenez or whatever, and you've got a big change. Whereas if you go for like a 6-year-old refill, all you get is distillery flavours. So we'll always try and keep that balance. Hopefully be able to show people. That's kind of one of the things, I guess, that we hope to do and we can do is over the next few years as we're evolving and developing is show everyone what Lochlea can be in all phases of our forum.
This conversation answered the question that I had previously, so this was perfect. But I wanted to get back to the barley, if you didn't mind, because like both of you had pointed out, you're sourcing it's your own barley from 2 miles away. And John, you'd used this word twice now, terroir, and that you wanted to be able to highlight that within the whiskey. And I have no argument for or against terroir when it comes to barley in whiskey, but I'm curious of how that's different. Obviously, from a logistical standpoint, it makes sense. You've got your own barley, and that kind of makes things a bit easier for you potentially. But from a terroir perspective, how is that barley informing what Lochlea will be? And do you believe that, if you got to a point where you had to ramp up production so much that if you had to purchase barley elsewhere, and maybe you're doing that already, I don't know if you're using 100% of your barley from your farms for your operation, or if you're doing a bit of a mix and match. Jeez. The more I talk, the more I'm messing up.
Yeah, there's a question coming.
There is a question coming.
Joshua's
how many more hours do you guys
wait
have?
Ages and then 3 come at once. So.
But I'm just curious of I guess how you protect that terroir in your final product so that it's beyond casks, right? How are you protecting it so that you're showing Ayrshire in the way that you want to show Ayrshire?
So well, it's the farm that grows all the barley as well. So it's 100% grown on the farm that the distillery's on as well, and that's something that makes us unique. Nobody does 100% homegrown barley. We don't have a floor maltings as of yet, but that we are certainly looking towards stuff like that as well, and that's the bit to me that will accentuate Ayrshire the most. If we get a kind of floor maltings and we get that done as kind of like, I guess, as naturally as we can, that will accentuate the kind of, I guess, the terroir the best way we can. And then when we extract the kind of flavours, we will see again, and we might go for a semi-cloudy wort so that we get the cereals and the fruit. So like it's just one of these things. It's jobs we still have to do, I guess, but we need to try and get a floor malting so that we can accentuate that Ayrshire terroir, I would say. That's good.
That's just to build on that as well, that what John says, the making us kind of unique within the industry is, I mean, actually us referring to the barley as local doesn't really do it justice at all. It's literally on site. It's I mean, the 2 miles that John mentioned, that's as far away as it goes because that's the size of the farm. Wow. Some of it is 100 yards from where it's where we're distilling. So yeah, it's definitely a big part of the story, as John said as well, about the malting side of things. What if we at some point do that as well? That closes the loop. We literally do everything on site. So although I know some people talk maybe more about terroir than we will, certainly in terms of using different forms of barley and seeing the difference. For us, we are the only company, we're the only distillery that use our barley. So to me, that's kind of the main thing. No one, everyone else uses barley from a few sources, so it's going to a lot of different distilleries, whereas Lochlea barley is unique to us.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. That's very cool. That's very cool. And just really quickly, speaking of the different barley varieties, are you playing around, seeing as you've got so much land? Are you concentrating on a single variety? Are you working with different ones because you're still in this slightly experimental phase? Like John had said, maybe we may do a slightly cloudy wort moving on if we feel we need to. So is that part of the farming practices?
Yeah, I think. I mean, certainly Neil, the owner has grown different varieties before. He did a batch of beer barley in a few fields a couple of years back to see how it went. We used to do a lot of concerto. We're now switched over to laureate, so that there's varieties there that we're using. I think the tricky part in all of this becomes how do you separate out each batch of a different strain of barley right through the process, and it you're talking about seriously reducing your efficiency of your plant by doing that. So
Yep.
It's a good question. I think right now we're quite happy with how the current crop that's being grown is working, but certainly wouldn't rule it out.
Okay. And the current crop is the barley type?
It's laureate, 100%
It is
laureate.
laureate. Okay. The closing question that we always like to ask, and I think this may be a special question for you because what day is it? The 27th? You've only launched the brand officially 2 days ago. So right now the sky's the limit. But with that limit in mind, what are you looking forward to across the next 5 years? Obviously, I understand what you had been looking forward to had just happened, but now that's behind you. What does the next 5 years look like, and what are you excited about?
Okay, I'll certainly go for it. I mean, personally, this first release coming out 2 days ago, that I'm surprised that my phone hasn't gone up in flames. The amount of having to recharge it 3 times a day, just with the amount of messages and requests and everything that are coming through it's been amazing. Obviously, there are still, like the US, for example, the stock is on its way, so it's not landed yet. Yep. So that there will be other waves of activity, which is great. It just builds even more anticipation. So that this first one has been really well received, but as an inaugural, you kind of take that to the side and say, right, that's a one-off. The exciting part for me is what we do now, and with John's help and looking at the Cask profile that we want to do for our core ongoing release, that will be really important this year. But on top of that, we have a plan to showcase the spirit in 3 or 4 different ways, kind of tying into what's happening on the site, on the farm at that time of year, and then relaying that into a spirit character and a brand and a pack. And I think, if we had this call this time next year, you would have potentially 4 really different but equally interesting expressions of Lochlea on your desk, which that's what I'm excited about, is getting to that point where we can start doing all the tastings and events and getting people's feedback and getting people cracking bottles and letting us know what they think.
Well, I've just opened my calendar, so which January day, or should we just go for the 27th again? I'm ready. I'm ready for this. And John?
Yeah, no, similar. I just we are planning as hard and as best we can, and we know how we want to showcase Lochlea and how we kind of the steps. So I guess 5 years from now, we will be sitting here with reflection mode on and seeing kind of what's developed, how it's developed. I guess what's coming, because it'll still be evolving, I feel, as well. So I think it'll always be tweaking or evolving as well. So that's the thing, I guess. And yeah, I'm the same as this time next year we will have 5 different whiskies, each one different, and maybe kind of We've talked about some of what they can be already. I don't know. I'm supposed to be teasing this out, I think, David, rather than kind of. I just want to tell everyone what we're doing. This is what we're doing. This is what we're doing. But I know it's because there's some cool stuff coming and some fortunate coincidences with some of the expressions as well coming. So there's the cryptic clue.
Oh, I love
That's wow. We'll be pulling that out of the archive this time next year. What did he mean by that on January 27, 2022?
The cryptic clue is it'll just about be getting launched at this time next year as well. So.
Oh, gosh.
So we plan, again, just planning ahead. So we know what we want to do. And so, yeah.
You're a master
links to the past that links to the future, yeah.
Well,
this has been terrific. Really terrific.
Yeah, we really appreciate your time today and talking and sharing a bit about Lochlea and what's to be expected. You know, from the import side, you know, it's so nice to have Lochlea as part of the Impex portfolio, and I know that our sales team is champing at the bit to get the stock here. I know it's forthcoming. Hopefully sometime in May it'll hit U.S. shores. So, you know, we'll see what global logistics looks like. You know, maybe that date will change. But it'll be exciting to roll it out and hopefully invite you guys over to our shores before too long.
Yeah. Continued success in making good old Scotch drink.
Nice. Like the Burns link at the end. Thanks for having us, guys.
Good to see us and hear you, and yeah, hopefully in the flesh soon as well, with a dram.
With a
That would
dram.
be good.
Yes.
Yeah.
We'll be there.
Yep.
Great.
Absolutely.
Cheers, gents.
Cheers.
Okay, take care.
Sincere thanks to both David Ferguson and John Campbell now of Lochlea, right? This is kind of a funny thing to say after as many years at Lefroy, but
almost 3 decades.
Right.
Absolutely remarkable.
Right. But what a great conversation, and quickly to put my Impex hat on, you know, another thanks to them for entrusting Impex Beverages to be their importer into the U.S. You know, being able to share Lochlea's whiskeys with retailers and with drinkers and whiskey dorks. I'm just so excited to be enjoying it both as a consumer myself, but as someone who gets to introduce the brand to people. That really has me excited.
I did have a question for you on that front.
Yeah.
Which is the first batch, the first release, the inaugural release that I think sold out before it hit store shelves, but it was insanely well received.
Yeah.
Is it the same bottles, the same liquid that's coming to the US?
Correct.
For the
Yeah,
inaugural?
So it's all the same, and you know, there's only so much liquid, and because it is the same, there isn't a lot coming to the U.S. So when you see this starting to hit store shelves, run, don't walk, grab it. And then after that, the last thing I want you to do is flip it out at an auction site. And the first thing that I want you to do,
open it.
Pop that cork, share it with friends, enjoy it, because it's remarkable liquid, thoroughly enjoyable. And there's always going to be more Lochlea. So buy more, open more, share more. That's what whiskey's all about. We say it with Single Cask Nation. I'm going to say it with this as well.
Yeah, it's... I was going to say, it's really interesting for me. And by that, I mean, I'm examining my own internal feelings here, which, as I've said for a long time, was in 1995 when Arran opened. And there was Arran on the Isle of Arran, across the Firth of Clyde from Ayr, where I was born and raised. I felt like I had a local distillery.
Yeah.
And I've always been a champion for Arran, a fan of Arran, and so very proud of what they've achieved over now 27 years, which almost 27, which is a remarkable number to throw around. I must be old. But I thought about it when we were sitting chatting with David and John, and we've got David sitting in Ayr, we've got John sitting in Glasgow, and we're talking about this farm that Robert Burns once farmed as well. And I was born, I grew up 2 miles from Burns's cottage. Robert Burns means the absolute world to me. And I know you've got your passionate love of vegetarian haggis, just like me. But he's nodding his head right now with a mouthful of vegetarian haggis. It's always the vegetarian haggis with you.
You gotta let me chew. You gotta let me finish here, Jason, so I can.
But no teeth.
Properly.
But there's now something about Lochlea that just has me so incredibly excited. And simply being a distillery in Ayrshire, it started to percolate. You could see a slight simmering. But now chatting with David, now chatting with John, now seeing the inaugural release, now having a direct connection to it with Impex. Gosh, sharing an importer with Lochlea in Ayrshire.
Oh my gosh. That's kind of crazy.
It really means the absolute world to me. And I said it. And I said at the end of the interview, I haven't even tasted the liquid yet. I've had wonderful reports, but I haven't tasted the liquid yet, and I'm already a champion of what they're doing and what they're setting out to achieve. Yeah. So personally, this is huge.
Well, think, and you said it before. You said it in the intro to the conversation, right? Think about the pedigree behind this distillery. Malcolm Rennie, right? That's the start of it. That's your Kilhoman. Malcolm Rennie did work with Glenn Murray. We have our own love for Glenn Murray. Mm-hmm. This is a man who knew what he was doing. So much so Rosebank had brought him on, right? So they've had a good start. And with David Ferguson coming from Beam Suntory, has everything that he's bringing to the distillery. And now you've got John Campbell coming in to carry the torch from what Malcolm Rennie had started. I'm so excited for this distillery, for their team, and like I said, for consumers, for drinkers, because I think it's going to be an absolute cracker for people. I think they're going to absolutely love it.
Agreed. And what else did we say in our intro to today's episode? It's you and me getting back out into the world. It's you and me getting to go overseas. And we already, told Jess, there's a Lochlea visit in our future. There's no visitor centre. You can't just pitch up on their doorstep. Don't do it, just like you wouldn't do it at Glen Elgin. Wink. Right? Don't go do those things. But we're going to get a chance to go and see them on site, taste some things, listen to them with shared liquid. And again, we said it in the interview, in January of 2023, they're looking at having had 5 releases in the first year of releases and getting to tell different Lochlea stories along the way. So I'm all in. I've said it more than once. I'm all in. I'm excited to see where we go. And I'm glad that you and Impex get to be part of that as well.
Yeah, it's exciting. It is exciting. Do we have any news to report this week, Jason? I don't think we do, but maybe I'm thinking wrong.
So for season 6, you and I, like any good marriage, we're mixing it up in the bedroom.
Oh, bounce you. Oh, wait, do you hear that, Jason? That is a wah pedal.
It's always
All right.
the what pedal with you?
It's always to the wah pedal.
Wah.
It's always to the wah pedal.
Always
with
the
you.
wah pedal with you.
Wah, wah, wah.
For season 6, what you and I wanted to introduce was a little bit more variety. And so we've
All right.
They
call those snacks, Jason. Some communities call that a snack.
Some call it swinging. Maybe we'll start swinging with our listeners. I don't quite know how to frame
Break
this.
out your red umbrellas.
But we're looking to have. Oh my God, this really does sound like a terrible argument that I would present to my wife. We're looking to have some more fun.
You've been open to it, right? You've been wanting to try it out. I mean, you said you were open.
These are your words. I'm just quoting your words back at you.
Terrible.
I've had far too much high quality Kilhoman to have this argument.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, sorry.
So there will be episodes where we have news. There will be episodes where we have emails. There will be episodes where we do some different kind of things. And I just want our listeners to be open to that. But
wait, hold on. Given their silence, it sounds like they agree.
to be clear, silence is not consent. Just to be clear. So
no, let's be very clear.
Very clear.
Yeah, so I like this. So we'll sometimes news, sometimes not, sometimes email, sometimes not, and then there's things we want to add, like you said. So continue, please.
We're coming out of the mailbag episode. The mailbag episode was incredibly well received. Incredibly so.
Oh my gosh.
It was incredibly well supported, and then it was incredibly well received. So that makes me very happy. There are many questions that we did not get through in that single episode. And so as the episodes go along, we're going to even pivot back to some questions that we didn't get to within the episode. One of which comes from Kevin Dunlop. And we're going to get to that next time out the gate. But in referring to the...
Kevin is the Chicago guy, right?
Yes,
serves.
there was we did cover a portion in the episode, and then there's a portion we did not get to in the episode. And it was a good portion,
Yep.
so we are going to come back to it. But for today, we had an industry friend reach out to make a few comments that, gosh, let's go whole hog on this one. This industry friend said, I'm just sending you some thoughts. These are not for the padcost regular listener, right? But we read them and we said, these have to be in the padcost. These are really excellent and would sit well with our listeners. And we'd offered up, what about if we just kept you anonymous and we put your words out? The person wrote back and they said, okay, anonymity will work. Maybe don't include the fetishism stuff. And we said, well, we're going to include the fetishism stuff. And they said, yes, I do. So here we go. It's a big email. I'm not going to apologize for that. And so I would say get comfy because there's a lot coming.
Okay. All right, hold on. Getting comfy, and I've actually just poured a bit more Kilhoman, so you do.
Well, I made a mistake. I just finished my second. So anyway,
Jason.
Dear whiskey influencers, so this person has come to the right place. Congratulations on rummaging through the post and putting together such an entertaining and enlightening episode. Certain topics resonated hard with me, and I wanted to share some thoughts of my own. Parentheses, they're probably not for repetition on the padcost. Close parentheses. The subjects in question were 1. Finishing bourbon. And I don't think that means bringing your glass to a close. I think it means putting it into other
Yep. I finished this bourbon. Next
into
one.
other casks. So here we go. I'm finding my mouth is drying a little bit here, so I've just poured a little more Kilchoman.
Smart.
There's the rubbing that you hate, Joshua. This time I know
There's
that I'm
the rubbing.
doing it.
I told you before. Everybody hears it. You do it, and it's.
That time I knew I was doing it at least. So number one is the finishing of bourbon. Number two is bourbon jumping the shark. And then in parentheses, surprise, surprise, they're connected. So here we go. The first topic, finishing bourbon, piqued my interest as I have been slowly deconstructing the quote-unquote purity fetishism within whiskey. It seems odd to me that folks celebrate the people that distill spirits and fill those spirits into cask. However, once that spirit is in the cask, the thinking goes that those same people should leave it the heck alone. Why? I think this quote-unquote just let the cask do the talking bias masks a deeper distrust and a failure on us all to communicate the value add that human intervention so often represents. The underpinnings of this distrust is the notion that intervention indicates a flaw. Just sidebar. This is why I wanted to include this, because it really touched on what you and I were covering in our answer here. And I just thought it added to the conversation. Another industry voice into the conversation I thought was really spot on.
Brilliant.
So
Yeah.
so I'm back to the email here. We need to get better at saying how cask finishing and blending, when done right, is a flex to opportunity and transformation. Not everyone wants that transformation, I guess. They want predictable, perfect maturation. Quote unquote, if you had to fix it somewhere along the way, it can't be worth drinking now. I'm sure psychoanalysts would make merry with this stance. I just find it frustrating and short-sighted. Where is that less great whiskey, of which there is a lot, going to go? I am pro-finishing bourbon because at least it is interesting. And he put interesting in italics.
Oh, look at that. That's serious business, Jason.
This brings me on to point 2. And then I nearly didn't bother asking if we could repeat this because this is a horrible compliment for you. And I really didn't want to be the one reading this on the podcast.
Son of a bitch. God damn it. Every time, Jason.
Oh, this, what I'm about to say out loud, I'm going to have vomit in the back of my throat as I say it. Just so you know. Okay, a little bit of Kilchoman to give me some courage. Delicious. This brings me on to point 2. So ably unpacked by Joshua.
A ba-boom. A ba-boom.
All those store picks are fine, really. They'll taste just lovely. As long as it is whiskey from one new charred oak cask, and to connect with my point above, it will simply sit in the slot expected of it. Consistency, right? My word here, consistency. Yeah. The word you hear going around.
Yeah, the one C word that we don't bleep on this
Any
podcast.
distillery. This author continues, you read out the James Foster email praising the Kilchoman finish Catoctin Creek. The one that we had a wee sip of before we started recording today. And Joshua, in hearing that email, said he had a tear in his eye. Of course! Because this wasn't a cask you bottled, it was a project you shaped. It is a release that wouldn't have happened without you. We're both basking in the glory of these words.
Yeah, he's trying to bring a tear to both of our eyes, not just. And by he, I mean they, because we haven't said whether this is a woman or a man.
Don't attach a gender to an anonymous email. Yeah. However, if X Store Wyoming didn't pick that barrel of Distillery Y, someone in Tampa or Tucson would have. That's a much less exciting proposition to me than your Catoctin. And the author says, sincere mazzles on a whole decade of SCN. You folks should be really proud. You don't get that email in your inbox and not run it on the padcost.
No, you don't at all. And sincere thanks to Bruce Dickinson of Iron Maiden for sending that email along. Oh shit, we weren't supposed to say who it was.
Yeah. Bleep out the Bruce Dickinson name. Don't use that.
Yes, the Bruce. Listen, I've got some comments here, but you are the one who was messaging back and forth with this person, and you're the one that who led with, we need to bring this on the podcast, in which I said, yes, we do need to bring it on the padcost. It's pronounced padcost, not podcast. And so I wanted to give you the floor to comment.
There's a few things going on here, one of which echoed with a conversation I was having with our very own Jess yesterday, which is when you're in the world of single cask bottling, we come along, we taste it, we say, that's a great cask. That will resonate with the nation. We're excited to put it out there. But all we've done is pick something we like.
Yeah.
And I don't want to downplay, and Jess also didn't want to downplay what it is we do. There's value in knowing your independent bottler's palate and knowing that if they liked a cask, there's a very good chance you will like that cask. Look what you did with this Kilchoman from Warehouse Liquors. You tasted that and you said, that's right up Jason's alley. I know Jason's palate. That's going to resonate. Boom. Home run.
Yep.
So on one hand, there is that part of our business where we come along and we find the best casks we can, we bottle them and we sell them to the nation. US, Canada, ROW, love it all.
Yeah. Yep.
When we have the opportunity, and the Catoctin Creek is such a good example of it, when we have an opportunity to experiment with friends who put in the day-to-day hard grind of running a distillery, that's a ton of fun for us. And the fact that we didn't know what the outcome was going to be when we combined those two 30-gallon Catoctin Creek New Charred Oak casks into the Kilchoman XPX Hoggy, it was exhilarating and worrying, but it held so much potential.
Yeah. Yep.
And as we tasted it, and we've described this on the podcast, as we tasted it and we saw it starting to come together and then seem to be farther apart and then be a complete article and the feedback on it, remarkable. And Foster was an example of that. That felt like an achievement where something was done. And we've got it with some single batch nation releases where we've said, these casks work together, and that seems like a great little project we've put out. And we go back to the very beginning of One Nation Under Whiskey with Mark Watt putting together some small batch releases for Cadenheads. And he felt like that was a bit of an achievement. And some people would say, but it's not a single cask. What are you trying to hide? This is to the author of this email here, right? Whiskey consumers are so passionate about this industry but they're also so aware of having the wool pulled over their eyes. And anything that resembles manipulation raises the question, why did you manipulate it? And yet, blends are manipulated. Single malts are manipulated, right?
Yeah.
Like the vast majority of products in the whiskey world are quote unquote manipulated.
Yeah, I think back to sometime in the 20-teens when Billy Walker still owned Glendronach and Benriach, and there was some word that, watch out, Glendronach are taking whiskey and finishing that whiskey in various casks and then releasing it as a single cask. And how dare they do that, because what's being released in the end, is it really a single cask? Because they may have married a bunch of other liquid and then put it into various finishing casks. And the question that I asked immediately was, did you get to taste that final bottling? Yeah, I did. Was it delicious? It was awesome. Does it matter? In the end, what Billy Walker has done is he has put his thumbprint on it to make the best Glendronach that he could make. And I would argue that there are others that do that, right? John Glazer does that with the various blends he does at Compass
David
Box,
Perkins,
right?
High West. Right.
With Campfire, right? Here's a guy who said, okay, bourbon's doing its thing, rye is doing its thing. What if I introduce smoky Scotch whiskey, and all of a sudden Campfire is created? And what if I marry 2-year-old rye with 16-year-old rye? Like, the world's your oyster. You could do what you want. At the end of the day, is the final product a delicious product for the consumer? And if the answer is yes, then that producer, and by producer, I'm saying not just someone who's actually distilled it and put it into cask, but someone who's taken that cast liquid and either finished it in something else or taken various casks and married them together to create something, back to blends. If they've created a beautiful product, what the hell does it matter? And yes, at times you will get whiskey that's been sitting in knackered wood that isn't doing anything, and you need to turn the ship around. But if you've turned the ship around and the final product is a delicious whiskey, what the hell does it matter?
Which, to this author's point, speaks to that purity fetishism, right?
Yeah.
When we get into single casks, we buy into some of the marketing that was filled, in the 1970s and was laid in the corner of a warehouse and hasn't been touched in all those years. And now your taste buds get to enjoy that when, to the Billy Walker example, warehousemen, who do tend to be men, have gone around re-racking casks. There's a leaker, there's a low fill. Let's not take up space with a cask that's half full or a quarter full. Let's get that liquid moved over. Let's top off some casks that have been losing 2% Angel share annually, right? There was no purity in the industry in the time these casks were sitting in warehouses. And yet we now sit in 2022, and I think we have for the better part of a decade, imagining untouched casks that were just waiting to be discovered.
One thing that the author said that really struck me was, once the liquid goes into cask, the idea is you're telling them, okay, now don't touch it. Meanwhile, before the liquid has entered the cask, you say, all right, and so how are you grinding your barley? Oh, you're doing the 70-20-10 ratio of husks. And okay, that's cool. And oh, is that a semi-lauter mash tun? Okay, that's cool. And oh, you're using two different kinds of yeast. Oh, you've got 72 hours fermentation, 160 hours, 48 hours. Okay, whatever. Slow distillation. I get it. Where's your cup? Right? So you want to know the expertise behind all of this, but as soon as it goes into cask, you're like, don't you dare fucking touch that.
Yeah.
No. Let them continue to work. Let them continue to perfect a liquid that goes into bottle that you could buy and enjoy. Yeah, it was the way they put it really struck me. It really struck me.
and then I think the tying point on this point number 2 about casks becoming available for store picks. And I think you'd said this in your answer, was there are X number of casks put to the side for store picks. And if you don't pick it up in Wyoming, it's picked up in Tampa, it's picked up in Tucson. I will say that the author moved from a state to 2 cities, but we won't hold that against them.
I think they just liked the T. Anything with a T, right? Tampa, Tucson, Tacoma, Tallahassee.
It sounds like the beginning of a Johnny Cash song.
Jason, I'm so glad you brought that email out, and I'm glad that the author was okay with us bringing it up, so long as we didn't mention who they were.
Yeah, and there were a few details I omitted along the way that maybe shared a few too many clues, but it was excellent. I thought it was. I think listeners of this podcast are the type of whiskey fans, whiskey consumers, and whiskey ambassadors who would want to further this type of argument. And we know within the nation, we have individuals who are looking for the next wonderful bottle of whiskey, primarily, spirit, secondarily, and really want to see what we can put in front of them. And that level of trust that we've talked about plenty of times really means a lot to us. But we also understand there's a wider consumer base there that is a little more leery of what's happening and how are they being treated and how are they being thought of. I
guess I shouldn't say I kind of get it. I do get it. It's people's money, right? It's their wallet. It's their hard-earned cash, and they want to have faith in what they're purchasing. But I think that it's our job. It's the industry's job to help educate these consumers to let them know that is there wool being pulled over the eyes? Are there releases that maybe are a little questionable? Perhaps. I would argue, however, that is definitely the vast minority compared to what is put out there in the big picture. Think about when NAS whiskey started coming about again, because there was this whiskey boom and people were concerned geez, that's expensive. Why am I paying for that? Well, there is really old whiskey in there, but there's young whiskey in there as well. And you get to taste what that blender that he or she has put their expertise into to create a delicious product in the end. You can understand why there was this hesitancy, because the Scotch whiskey industry has done a phenomenal job of educating people that, hey, if you like 10 years old, you should try the 12. Exactly. And if you think that 12 was good, and so on.
Exactly, yeah. No, I think the industry shot themselves in the foot a little bit. And you could argue some of the marketing around single casks has shot the industry in the foot a little bit as well. We joke about this now, and you and I and Jess were just joking about this the other day, but this sense of crawling around warehouses and scrambling over casks and getting your clothes filthy and popping bungs, as you go along. It's so rich with the imagery, but it's not really the truth of the matter. It definitely happens occasionally, once in a while. It can be fun, but
there's still magic,
right?
Yeah.
Right, there is still magic. I think that's a nice way to leave it.
Jason, this was brilliant. Getting back with you again, starting the 6th season, sharing our conversation with David and John, and this email that we got from an industry friend was such a joy. And being able to do it over many drams of this Kilhoman 100% Isla, it was just a blast. Really quickly, I know you have something you want to say, but I woke up this morning.
That's what I had to say.
I heard that. I woke up this morning and I hit the treadmill and I ran 5 miles. And while I'm stretching, while I'm doing my sit-ups, I was thinking, God damn, this week was a really long week. And I'm not sure if I spoke with Jason more beyond being on an interview with him. and that saddens me. Anytime I don't get my Jason time, it really saddens me. And so
I get that.
Being able to spend all of this time with you, it was time well spent. So it's been an absolute pleasure doing that and kicking off this season with you. I'm so excited for what we have to come.
Yeah, no, I think I agree with you wholeheartedly. It's lovely spending this time together. And I think the thing we've said about this podcast a lot is it gives us such a wonderful opportunity to just sit and talk to each other. And the fact that our listeners want to tune into that and listen to us simply talking to each other is brilliant. It's absolutely remarkable. And so, I love you. I love them. It's a good place to leave this first episode of our 6th fucking season.
So, for those listeners, if you love us as much as we love you, please go to Apple Podcasts. See how I did that?
I thought you were going to go with as much as we love ourselves.
No one loves us as much as we love ourselves, Jason. No one. Yeah, please go to Apple Podcasts and give us, we'd love a 4 or 5 star rating, preferably 5. Leave some kind words. That would be lovely. And please, like Jason had mentioned before, our mailbag episode was hugely popular, well supported, and we couldn't have done that without mail. So if you want to reach out to us, please do so. Questions at One Nation Under Whiskey. You can also email us, info@singlecastnation.com. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on Instagram. You can find us on Twitter. However you want to communicate with us, please do. We really love hearing from you. And Jason, I look forward to episode 2 of season 6, which is going to be quite the departure from episode 1, at least from one country to the next and one maturing style to the next, if you will. And so I'm excited for that.
Brilliant.
So with that said, Jason, I bid you adieu, and I say cheers to you. I say cheers to our listeners, and of course to David Ferguson and John Campbell. Absolutely lovely time spending with you.
Cheers all the chins.
Cheers. See, I used an actual Glencairn, and you're just using a fucking sample bottle with a glass of water.
I was thirsty.
Dude. Come on.
I was thirsty. I don't know what else to tell you.
For.
I was thirsty.
It's what the Kilhoman's for.
All the chins.
Someone's a big old jerk, and his name
I don't know why.
Jason.
And if there are 2 people here and one of them hasn't hit record, ain't this guy.
You're like, but
I'm going to have to
thing.
move the...
One more thing.
I'm going to have to move this foil far away because I am going to fidget with that foil.
Speaking of,
Did you hear me drop my cork yesterday?
no, I didn't. But the number one thing, and I don't edit it out because it very much is a you thing, and I kind of like it.
Swallowing water.
No, is this you do? You do this.
Was I doing it yesterday?
You do it all the fucking time. It's hilarious.
Oh, wow. If you had asked me just straight up, I would have said I haven't done that in 6 months.
Oh my gosh, it's every episode. Do you not listen to our episodes? You probably don't even listen to our episodes, do you?
Listen, I'll be honest with you. I'm maybe one behind.
Oh, okay. You son of a bitch. You need to listen to my hard work. You need to listen to my hard work.
Here's the thing. You know how much I appreciate all your hard work.
Do I?
If I was to listen to it, it wouldn't change how much I appreciate all your hard work. I think what you do is remarkable. Week in and week out, your commitment to the... Wait a second, this is recording. What am I saying? Don't want that to be an Easter egg. Okay.
You ready?
I'm ready. Pro level. Just quick.
Jesus Christ. You fucking out. Here we go. You ready?